When my husband was tucking our son in, he said, "Mommy's just the backup parent until she gets a real job, buddy." I stood in the hallway outside my son's bedroom door at 8:30 on a Wednesday night, frozen with my hand on the doorknob. My husband Trevor was sitting on the edge of 6-year-old Aiden's bed, tucking the blanket around him. I'd just gotten home from my nursing shift at the hospital and wanted to say goodnight before Aiden fell asleep, but Trevor's voice carried through the partially open door, and I heard every word clearly. "Mommy's just the backup parent until she gets a real job, buddy. That's why she's never here for important stuff. Real moms stay home with their kids." Aiden's small voice asked if I didn't love him as much as Daddy did. But Trevor laughed softly and said that wasn't it exactly, but that some jobs were more important than others, and some parents were more important than others. He said I'd chosen patients at the hospital over my own family, and that's why Daddy had to do everything. Aiden asked if that's why I missed his school play last week. Trevor said exactly right. That's why Daddy was the one who showed up and took pictures and cheered. I pushed the door open and both of them looked at me. Trevor's face shifted instantly to a warm smile and he stood up from the bed. Trevor walked toward me and said I was home early, kissing my cheek as he passed into the hallway. His tone was cheerful and normal, nothing like the poison he'd just been feeding our son. I sat on Aiden's bed and asked if he'd brushed his teeth. He nodded and pulled the blanket up to his chin. I asked about his day at school and he gave short answers, not making eye contact. When I leaned down to kiss his forehead, he turned his face away slightly. Not a full rejection, just enough to notice. I asked if everything was okay, and he said Daddy already tucked him in and he was tired. I told him I loved him, and he mumbled something back that might have been "love you too," or might have been nothing. I left his room and found Trevor in our bedroom scrolling through his phone. I asked what he'd been telling Aiden about me. Trevor looked confused and asked what I meant. I said I'd heard him call me the backup parent and tell Aiden I didn't have a real job. Trevor laughed and said I must have misheard. He said he'd been talking about backup plans for Aiden's birthday party. I told him I knew what I'd heard. He set his phone down and his expression changed from friendly to cold. He said if I was going to eavesdrop on private conversations between him and his son, maybe we needed to talk about boundaries. His son, not our son. I caught that immediately. Trevor stood up and said he'd been trying to help Aiden understand why I was never around for important family moments. He said it wasn't his fault that I'd prioritized my career over being a present mother. I reminded him that I was a registered nurse working 3 12-hour shifts per week at the regional hospital, which provided half our household income and our entire health insurance. Trevor said exactly. I was working when I should be home raising our child. He'd been picking up my slack for years, being the parent who actually showed up. I asked what he meant by that, and he started listing things. He took Aiden to school every morning. He picked him up every afternoon. He went to parent-teacher conferences alone because I was always working. He coached Aiden's soccer team. He volunteered at the school. He was the one Aiden called when he was scared or sick or needed something. I was just the person who came home exhausted and distant 3 nights a week. I felt anger building in my chest, but I tried to stay calm. I pointed out that my nursing shifts were Wednesday through Friday and that I was home with Aiden every Saturday through Monday. Trevor said being home wasn't the same as being present. He said I was always recovering from work or preparing for the next shift. He said Aiden had started asking why mommy didn't love him as much as other moms loved their kids. I felt my throat tighten. Aiden had never said anything like that to me directly. Trevor saw my reaction and his expression softened into something that looked almost sympathetic. He said he wasn't trying to hurt me, just being honest about what Aiden had been feeling. He said maybe I should consider going part-time or finding a different job with better hours, something that would let me be more available for our family. I said we needed my income and my benefits. Trevor said we'd figure it out. His contracting business was doing well and we could manage on less if it meant having a real mother for Aiden instead of an absent one. The way he said real mother made me understand this wasn't a new conversation in his mind. This was something he'd been thinking about and apparently discussing with our son for a while. I asked how long he'd been telling Aiden I wasn't a real parent. Trevor said he'd never used those exact words. He'd just been honest with Aiden about why I missed school events and bedtimes and soccer games. He was helping Aiden understand that not all parents prioritize their children the same way. I told him that was parental alienation and it was abusive. Trevor's face went hard. His response shocked me. Full story is linked below or on my channel.